Well, Nigel Farage, welcome to you.
Thank you.
How do you think the night is going to go for Donald Trump?
I learned a big lesson at the time of the referendum campaign. Don't call it anything.
I know what you're going to say.
It's a mugs game. I don't know. It's going to be close, isn't it? Probably. You go with the bookmakers, you go with the markets. Probably.
Don't concede it and go to bed.
But I'm not.
Otherwise, there'll be another result.
But probably. But who knows? This is 2016. It's the year of big surprises. It's going to be all about turnout. The thing that I'd underestimated on the evening of Brexit was just how high that turnout actually was, and it was non-voters going to the polls, people who hadn't voted in their lives, that tipped the balance. The question is, Trump has been going for exactly the same kind of voters. Have they turned out? I don't know.
Now, the polls are closing in Ohio, North Carolina and West Virginia in half an hour's time. It'll be very interesting to see what happens there. Both CNN and Fox are projecting Hillary Clinton wins Vermont. No great surprise there. Now, at the beginning of the year, Nigel Farage, I don't imagine that you would have thought you would have become busy mates with Donald Trump.
Well, it was odd the way it happened, but I guess Brexit was such a big story. Not just in Britain or Europe, but globally. It was a huge story in America. And I went out to the US Republican convention just as a tourist, and I was stunned, not just by the delegates, but by American people just saying, wow, what a story. Some thought it was great, some thought it was crazy. And Team Trump picked up very early on that, the idea that you take on the establishment, you're the little guys, they're the big guys, and in the end you win. And frankly, every single night for the last couple of months, when Trump goes round America, he says, this is going to be Brexit. In fact, he even calls himself Mr. Brexit. I'm not quite sure what qualifies him for that. That wasn't me, listeners.
No.
So they really, the Republican activist base, have seen this as, wow, anything's possible.
Chuka Ramuna, you're probably listening to that with a slight degree of horror. You hear Nigel Farage talking about Donald Trump. I guess Donald Trump is probably not somebody that if you met him, you might think that you would get on with him. But maybe he's different in private to the public Donald Trump.
I haven't had the misfortune of meeting the man. But with so many people in politics, often the public and the private are quite different. And it's interesting, actually, to slightly go off field, Ed Balls, the impression and the kind of side of Ed that people are now seeing on Strictly Come Dancing, so many people said, oh my God, I didn't know he was quite like that. And I was
Some of us did.
Well, privately, he's always been, I'm not surprised that he wants to do it, and it's showing a different side of him, which is refreshing.
Nigel Farage, is Donald Trump different privately to the public Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think on stage he comes across as pretty aggressive, and the one thing you don't see with a Trump rally is that much humour. And yet, one-on-one, he's incredibly charming. Yeah, sure, he's a big alpha male who wants to be in control, but he's very charming and actually very witty and humorous. And what I noticed, one of the reasons that he's built up this sort of... look, he's not the Republican candidate. That's a ridiculous concept. He's an independent. He's been disowned by his own party, but the reason he's built this People's Army is he's very good with people. I watched him, going through the crowd, meeting people, having time for people, doing the photographs of people, and I could see why he was building this strong personal loyalty.
Can I ask a question though, Nigel?
Yeah.
Because he's not the only US politician who people would put in that bracket who can press the flesh and is good with people. What beyond that have you seen?
Well, I would say this to you, Chuka. I've seen some very senior British politicians who frankly hate the public.
Yeah, I know.
They really don't like voters and ordinary people,
but
and they can't wait to get away from them as quickly.
But
and what I saw with Trump was actually this guy was really good at plunging into the crowd, shaking hands, doing the pictures, signing the autographs, and in doing that, and a phenomenal number of public meetings that this guy's done over the last few months, he's built a people's army.
But lots of people, that's a feature of the kind of razzmatazz, and I don't say that in at all pejorative way, and be clear about it. It's a feature of the culture and tradition of American politics. But what I'm wondering is, what beyond that have you seen in him in terms of that ability to engage?
Well, I think what he does, and you would probably call them populist movements or something
We've
like
just
that.
been talking
We've
about
been
that.
talking about
I know. I was listening in the car. but actually, and certainly Alex Salmond has done it in spades in Scotland.
Yeah.
It's about speaking in a language that ordinary people actually understand and
But
connect
fine,
to.
Nigel, but I didn't go around attacking Muslims and Mexicans or demeaning women. And, you know, the question, I suppose...
No, what you do is encourage people to be nasty to English people. I mean, goodness me.
That's rubbish. But let me
You're
finish-
accusing
let me
someone else of
finish-
virtue signaling.
Let me finish the
Dear,
question.
dear.
One
But
at a time.
Never mind about me, Nigel. Just think about the person that you went to speak for and what he said about Mexicans, about women, about Muslims, and just tell the LBC listeners why you wanted to announce your support for someone who's had that progression of views throughout a campaign. Just explain that to the...
Well, Alex, I mean, I've not heard Trump defend violent supporters who, in a very racist, aggressive way, attacked a politician from England in the streets of Edinburgh, and you wouldn't even condemn them. So I don't think you're on particular...
No,
I'm not
Nigel,
sure that...
Nigel,
no, it
never-
is about
never-
you,
never-
because you
never-
said a
never
moment
mind
ago
about-
that
never
you hadn't
mind
said
about
X,
me.
Y, and Z.
Never
So I'm
mind.
not sure
Just tell
that
the
you're on
audience
that
why
stronger audience.
You went to declare your support for Donald Trump, who, by his own publicity, announced his attitudes to women, to Muslims, to Mexicans. Just concentrate on that point and don't
Yeah.
try the deflection that you're so good at, Nigel. Just answer that point.
My dear fellow, it's you that started it by saying I wouldn't speak like that. And anyway, I haven't
just
heard.
tell- why did you-
I haven't
why did you
heard
do that?
Trump defend violence against opponents.
Why did you
and
do
maybe
it?
you should answer that in a
Well,
moment.
you won't be listening in this
I
campaign,
think that
but
Trump
just
has
answer the
made.
point.
I think Trump has made some outlandish statements, not ones that I would support. That's for sure.
But you supported him.
No, I haven't even endorsed him. But
You went to
But
speak
hang
for
on,
him,
Nigel,
not
you went and
endorse that.
you appeared at one of his rallies
I
with
was
him on the
just, I
stage.
It was a
was
non-endorsement
just simply
appearance.
telling the Brexit story. No, and you can take that as you wish. But I certainly wouldn't go
hang on,
there.
he's saying that with a huge grin on
One
his
at a
face.
time.
Let me tell you what Trump stands for. And yes, he has made some outrageous statements. He stands for national democracy. He believes that border controls matter. He thinks that Islamic terrorism is a great threat that faces the Western world. Hillary Clinton can't even bring herself to use the word. And just as importantly, his attitude towards foreign affairs is fascinating. She is the hawk. She is the person that has supported endless wars.
And that's
she
a
is the
non-endorsement
person.
endorsement.
She is the person that wants to go on provoking Putin. And I do think actually it's quite grown up to say that George Orr is better than War. And if Trump becomes president, he'll fly to Moscow and at least sit down and talk to Putin. So for all those reasons, I don't think the guy's perfect,
didn't
far from
endorse
it,
him.
but he is an agent for change, and he does, on some of the big issues, I do believe, stand for the right thing.
But why, Nigel? I don't understand
Nigel-
this. You're usually very straight up. You
Yeah,
say
straight-
exactly what
straight
you
Nigel.
think.
I just
usually. But why don't you just be honest and just say you support
want
him,
him
you
to
endorse
win.
him, you want to see him as the next president of the United States? There's two people who could end up in that position at the end of tomorrow, either him or Hillary. Why don't you just be honest and say you want to see him as the president of the United States?
Well, I did say that I wouldn't vote for Hillary if she paid me.
Why are you dancing around this? I don't get it.
Well, because I criticised Obama
wants to
for
follow
coming
Ed
here
Balls,
and
that's
telling us
why.
what to do.
But
And
you're
I-
not telling the
and I am a
states what to do,
foreigner,
you're just
and I am
giving a view.
foreigner.
You're
Look,
just giving a view.
I think it's pretty clear which side of the divide
Just
I am.
say so. I don't
Sheila,
understand.
Sheila Fogarty, bring some order to these proceedings for me, will you? Because I failed to do
Well,
so.
you know, I would, except I'm at a party surrounded by drunk people, so I don't think you,
lucky
you
you.
sound like
Nigel's
you're at a
heading
party.
your way, I
You
think.
sound like you're at a party. Surrounded by drunk people, but I actually am at one. Listen, I want to bring in Jacob Rees-Mogg here. You wanted some civilization in the mix. Here it is. Jacob Rees-Mogg, North East Somerset MP. And I think I'm right in describing you as tribally Republican, Jacob. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely right. In normal circumstances, I would support the Republican candidate. But I've been very interested in what Nigel Farage has been saying, in that Donald Trump is basically an independent and has run against his own party rather than with it. And that rather salves my conscience in coming to the conclusion that I wouldn't in the end have been able to support him.
I noticed, it's probably worth me telling our listeners, Jacob, that they can go to LBC's Facebook page and see the guests in the studio. Obviously not us at the US Embassy, but yourselves in the studio. Very impressed. You're sporting a tuxedo.
Before I came here, I was speaking to the MCC Golfing Society dinner on a combination of Brexit and the American elections.
I thought it was in my honour.
Well, I always thought that LBC dressed in the way the Home Service used to. So I'm rather shocked to see that Mr. Dale is without a tie.
I know I can't prove it, but I'm wearing a ball gown and a string of pearls myself. But anyway, listen, what are you making of what you're hearing coming out of the States so far and of the campaign generally? Your thoughts on what might happen next?
I think it makes no sense to predict an election at this stage in the evening. The votes are being counted and what will happen will happen. I think it's worth bearing in mind that American elections are conducted at a different tempo from British elections. They campaign more aggressively and for longer, and that's quite alien to the rather more calm and sedate British elections. Though actually with the two gentlemen to my right, I'm not sure that's invariably true. With the gentleman to my left, it is true. It's more sort of sedate and civilised, if I may say so.
I'll take that as a compliment.
And to your left in more ways than one, yeah.
Indeed. And the two gentlemen on my right fight very tough populist campaigns, both of them actually at the top of their profession in that regard. But American elections are different.
I'll do it rather differently, but it was clear that Alex Salmond was trying to get Nigel Farage, and Chuck Ramuna was in fact trying to get Nigel Farage to openly say, I endorse Donald Trump, and he wouldn't. You've said that you are tribally
Same
a
old
Republican.
politicians. They never answer.
Hang on, guys. How far in your support? How far in your support for Donald Trump will you go, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
I would not vote for Mr. Trump, and I would not vote for Mrs. Clinton. I'm afraid I would abstain in this election. I'd spoil my ballot paper.
And you see, that's quite interesting because several Republican friends of mine in the States are doing exactly that. One of them, who we might be hearing from later, Daniel Forrester, he's writing in John Kasich on his ballot paper, which is effectively spoiling his ballot paper, isn't
Jacob,
it?
who would you have written in?
Who would I have written
Well,
in?
you can write in on American ballot papers.
Boris Johnson. I think he'd be a magnificent president of the United States, and he is, of course, eligible as well.
Yes, because he was born there.
Yes.
Now there's a thought.
Honestly, Jacob, fancy trying to get rid of the foreign secretary. You should be ashamed of yourself.
No, I think it would be very good for British foreign relations if
President Boris
he became
Johnson.
president.
Nigel Farage, do you think that if Donald Trump becomes president, he might offer you a role in his White House?
Well, the one thing I do know, if Trump becomes president, is that he actually likes this country, something the Obama administration
How do you know that?
doesn't. Oh, because he's told me himself. You know, I feel a big, strong relationship. His mother, of course, was Scottish. I know Alex Salmond knows him pretty well, too. He loves this country. He wants to get the special relationship back to where it ought to be. He made it very clear we were at the front of the queue, and I rather like that. Is he going to offer me a job? Well, I'm hoping he might if he wins. I think, he'll be in need of a proper Eurosceptic ambassador in Brussels to the European Union. I mean, I would rather like that job. And being a foreigner would not disqualify me.
How about that, Chuck Ramuna?
Nigel going off to Brussels to
Wouldn't be the
represent
first
the
time, would
United
it?
States. I'm lost for words. What can I say?
Well, as long as we can bring the EU down, it doesn't matter how we do it, does it? I mean, because we want to get democracy back in Europe, and liberty and wealth.
Surely Nigel deigning to be ambassador from
I thought you were
America
becoming
to
a lord.
Brussels. Yeah, but
I thought it was
no, you can be both. You can be both a
That's
lord.
true, Lord
and
Farage.
American ambassador.
Gosh, I'm going to be very busy, aren't I?
Is this a recognition of the importance of the European Union that such a person would be
Sheila, we need your
appointed to
help
such a
again.
role?
Well, you don't need my help. I'll just wade in every now and again.
He hates Brussels so much he wants to go back to it.
Once I've dealt with the drunks here, I'll deal with the drunks in the studio.
We're drinking water here, Sheila.
I know, I'm
have
kidding you.
In these global radio months.
Although I have to say, for the first time I'm reading, we're live on Facebook, so if you go to LBC's Facebook page, for the first time I'm seeing this high-speed comment that comes in. I'll try and read a few, but I feel like an aged old granny who can't quite keep up with Facebook as I read these messages. Come back, Nigel, we need you, says Jessica Wall. John Dismore says, is it Halloween still, LBC? Cheryl Parker says, take your money from an organisation you want to destroy. I'm not quite sure what that means. Stephen Anthony, no. And Nicola, no. Some of them, I'm looking at these.
This is the danger of reading live comments on Facebook.
No.
Twitter is a halcyon ocean of calmness compared to
No,
Facebook
actually,
Live.
I did want to come in just a moment ago because, Nigel Farage, I wanted to ask you, you called for protests at the Supreme Court, and I know that at the time of or ahead of the final referendum vote in June, you were concerned that if it didn't go the way of Brexit, that there would be, you didn't use the word riots, but you thought that there could be trouble, heated disturbance on the streets. How concerned are you that if Trump loses, we might see that up to and including riots on the streets of the United States?
Well, I mean, if the Trump supporters felt the election had been cheated from them, there might be a danger of that. I hope they don't. And similarly, in this country, what I want is for Eurosceptics who are frustrated by delay, frustrated by hearing MPs who wish to ignore, a clear vote to leave not just the EU but the single market. What I want to do is to channel that frustration into something that is peaceful, and peaceful protest, I think, is the right way.
Okay, thank you for that answer to the question.
Sorry, Sheila.
No, go.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, in the long term, does it really matter to this country who becomes the next president of the United States? I mean, our relations with the United States are surely so strong that they can withstand anybody.
I think it's enormously in the British interest to get on with whoever happens to be the President of the United States. I think it's ill-advised of British politicians to be aggressively rude towards either of the candidates because one of them will win and we will need to work with that person. I think one of the things Tony Blair did well was managing to get on both with Bill Clinton and with George W. Bush, that was in the British national interest and was a political success on his part. But is the relationship always that strong? I think an element of personality is important, that when Bill Clinton was elected president, he didn't get on with John Major, and that was damaging to our interests and didn't help that the two leaders were not fond of each other. So I think we want to get on, but that if our Prime Minister is sensible and our diplomacy is effective, then you're broadly right that the individual in charge won't make that great a difference, particularly considering the separation of powers in the US working in such a way that makes it hard for a president to change things fundamentally.
Can I just, Jacob, the art for the British Prime Minister is not to get on with an American president as Tony Blair did with George W. Bush by joining in an invasion of Iraq, the price of which we're still paying for. The art is much more what Harold Wilson did, which was managed to get on with Lyndon Johnson without going into Vietnam. It's easy enough to get on with someone if you join them in a disastrous illegal invasion of another country, the consequences of which the world is still enduring.
I think the point you make about Harold Wilson is an extremely valid one, and the relationship he had with Lyndon B. Johnson, in spite of not supporting Vietnam, was very beneficial to the UK. Jimmy Carter and Jim Callaghan, I believe, gave each other suits with JC in the lining, so close was their personal relationship. It hasn't just been Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, it's been a long-running theme, but personal relationships are more important, I think, than the party that is in charge.
And if you look at the history of the relationship between those two, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, she stood up to him far more than people actually think. There's plenty of books to provide a lot of evidence for that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Charles Moore's biography of Margaret Thatcher is absolutely brilliant in describing their relationship. But she also knew that America would always fundamentally act in America's interest, and therefore we should never overstate the special relationship. They are a very important ally to us. We're not quite so important to them. They're much bigger than we are, and they're more single-minded in following their own self-interest.
Nigel Farage, quick final question to you. I know you've got to head off. Try to look forward. I know you don't want to really sort of call this election for anyone at the moment for reasons you've made very clear. But imagine in 6 months' time we've had President Trump. Where do you think the relationship between him and Prime Minister Theresa May will be?
Well, I think he'll be saying, look, let's have a trade deal. You are one country, I don't fear, with undercutting of Labour, so we'll be well down that road, I hope, at least in terms of the conversation. And I think in a post-Brexit world, that's important for us. The other very important thing, if Trump wins, that Britain needs to do is Trump has questioned the contribution of many members of NATO, and I think he's right in a way. A lot of members of NATO are simply not pulling their weight. Now, I would not want to see Trump's criticism of NATO becoming American withdrawal from NATO. That would worry me, and I think worry a lot of Europe too. And I think in that regard, it's very important that we have a good relationship with President Trump, if that's what we get. At the moment, the Conservative Party, the traditional friends of the Republicans, have no conversation with Team Trump at all. Elements of the Labour Party, like the London Mayor, have been pretty rude to him, although you could argue he'd been pretty rude about Muslims. So at the minute, you know, in this country, I think apart from Piers Morgan and myself, no one knows him. So it will be important to build a relationship and to be the bridge to try and make sure we can redefine what NATO is. Very important.
And you talk about good conversations. When was the last time you had a word with Donald Trump? Does he ring you up for advice?
No. He doesn't ring me every single day. Of course he doesn't. But, you know, I do know his team, and I am in touch with them on a very regular basis. Listen, if he wins...
When did you speak to him last?
If he wins, it matters.
When did you last speak to him personally?
Not for a little bit, but that doesn't matter.
A little bit.
That's a
Have you
purely
met? Hang
private
on,
thing.
I need to know. Have you met Melania?
It's a pure. I'm not going to discuss who I've met, what I've done.
Go on, you can tell us if you've met her or not, surely.
No. I don't do indiscretion.
He's practicing being a diplomat.
Come on.
Exactly. I'm getting ready for my role in Brussels.
You're becoming positively statesmanlike. Nigel, I have a feeling you might be heading Sheila Fogarty's way at the US Embassy. Am I right?
If they're still serving, I'm on my way.
Well, Sheila, you might be able to get that answer out of him by 3 o'clock because
Well,
we've had
you
a few
know,
snifters.
come
by
and
then.
join us, Nigel Farage, because I have a whole series of questions that I
I'll
want
see
to
you
put
very
to
soon.
about all kinds of
Okay,
things.
Nigel,
Okay.
thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed. Gareth Knight, our elections analyst. Let's just go through.
We will make America great again.